Hello and welcome to Amy Talks Any. My name is Amy, I do talk any and maybe anything, but not just any, because today, whatever this episode is going to come out, I'm going to be talking about Kaiju number 8, pretty much the entirety of it, because I got caught up with the manga since the last episode. And well, hopefully I'll also be covering Akane Banashi, but I'm not sure, I haven't really done anything regarding that yet. But I'll definitely be talking about the third and last episode in the Rod Read or Die OVA, and at least 2 episodes of the Hellcat anime. But before that, how are you? How's everyone doing? Can you hear scratching in the background? If so, that's a cat. It's not my cat, but it's a cat. Just a moment, I'm going to have to stop her. That's it, the cat has been annihilated, just like the kaiju in this manga. Unless she starts meowing on the door. If she does that, then I'll just have to record it another time, I think. By the way, she's called Midnight, but she's not black. She's like about half white and half gray. But her like not really brother, but quote unquote brother, is a completely black cat called Nightmare. So I didn't choose any of the names, don't ask me. It's kind of weird, it's kind of funny. As I was saying, how are you? How are you doing? As I was saying, how are you doing? I'm doing okay-ish. I don't remember how I said that I was doing last episode. But throughout this week, something fun that happens is I realized that I'll probably have to switch jobs soon. Not like soon in the next month. I mean like somewhere maybe early next year. For now, I have to like kind of settle down and well stabilize my financial situation. There's some stuff that I need to buy for myself, but the place that I'm working at, it's kind of close to where I live. Like I walk for 20-25 minutes without walking particularly fast, and I get there. So not super close, but well, I don't need to take a bus every day, so that's already better. But it kind of does some things that I'm pretty sure are illegal, or at the very least, if they're not legal, at the very least they're like kind of abusive, but not to me, like not to the people working there, but to clients. I'm not going to elaborate on what I mean, but yeah, it just kind of feels uncomfortable to say some things to clients that I might not agree with. So unfortunately, I need a job to survive since we live under capitalism for now. So I don't know. Maybe I'll stay there for like a year at most, and then I'll look for something else that is close by. But not now. For now, I kind of need the money. Now, on that note, that's weird. Well, what else has happened? I don't think much has happened. I have no idea what determines like which Saturday I have to work on. I just randomly find out that I don't have to work this Saturday, or I might not have to work that's next Saturday. I'm not even trying to understand it. It's a weird place. It's a big company, but it's a very unorganized place. I had something else that I was planning to say, but now that I'm recording, I completely forgot it. What was it? I don't know. If I remember later, I'll just like talk about it and edit it into the introduction. But as I said in the last episode, in case you've listened to it, and if you have, then you should, because I talk about the beginning of these stories in the last 2 episodes. But as I talked in the last episode in particular, I'll be trying a structure where I'll choose one specific story to. I'm not really writing anything about it, I'm just maybe taking some notes and then reading a bunch of it or watching a bunch of it and give you an unscripted, maybe a little bit scripted in the future, overall review. And after that, I'll talk about other stories, like 1 or 2 chapters or episodes at a time. And then for the next episode, let's say, I'll take one of those stories and make a bigger review of it, just like I'll be talking about Kaiju number 8 today. And that way I'll be able to keep cycling through different stories. Like, ideally, I would be I don't know, spending an hour talking about one specific story, giving you my overall opinion on it and made my recommendation. Of course, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, and then I'll be covering like two or three others. And then next week, one of those two or three others is going to be the roughly 1 hour long discussion. I'm not even sure it's going to be 1 hour. I'm just figuring it will be. We'll have to. Well, I'm going to find out this episode, I guess. And eventually, I'll also do like other stuff, other media. I watched a bunch of movies in the last few episodes. The last few days. What am I talking about? I think that's what I was planning on talking about. That I don't watch a lot of movies. Like I have watched a lot of movies in my life, but most of them were during my teen years and when I was like I was doing whatever and something wanted to watch a movie. Someone wants to watch a movie. And I would just watch it with them. Generally, it would be like my mother, or the movie would just be like airing on television that day, and I would just watch it. But recently, I don't watch a lot of movies, but for the last was 3 or 4 days, I watched a bunch of movies. Not a bunch, but one every day for 2 days is already more movies than I probably watch like in a month. In the last few years, like from 2 years to before that, I think I would go like for months without watching a single movie. I would just watch anime and read books. But now I'm reading more manga and watching more movies. So I might just do like a bonus episodes talking about that. One of the ideas that I had was to make a, well, in the future, of course, but make a secondary channel called, well, Amy Talks Anything. And in that one, I will only cover media that isn't anime or manga. And hopefully I would like be able to get like a different guest every week. Or I might even like I don't know. Maybe I'll decide to do it permanently with someone, and then by that point it will be called M Talk Zen. It will be called something else. I just like the idea of what I'm envisioning here. Like, let's say I'm eventually able to quit my job and just do this. I would like to get like 2 episodes of this podcast out, and then 1 episode of the bonus podcast, and like something else for Patreon, so that I can separate my work in like weeks. Like I have to do 2 anime and manga podcast episodes in 2 weeks in a row. And after that, I spend another week doing something for Patreon, and the next week doing something more laid back on the Anything channel. Again, I'm just saying these things to get it out there because, well, I don't know, maybe people might have an opinion on it, or it will hopefully simply help me by having it noticed down somewhere. Oh, and something else. Well, I don't know which anime I'll be covering for next season since I'm not really doing seasons. The one that I'm positive I'm going to talk about is So no Frieren. The first episode, which I believe is going to be 2 hours long, so basically a movie, is going to it airs well a week from now or 6 days from now, something like that. I might just make an episode talking about it alone. It's probably like a good thing actually, because then I would have every now and then I would have certain episodes coming out faster. And it's probably a good thing for me to have some episodes that are shorter as well. So that if you're only really interested in hearing my opinion about a certain anime that is airing now, or a certain manga that maybe is getting popular, that's like an easier way to get that to people than instead of having to wait to talk about something that I might want to talk about until the next episode comes out. So yeah, well, watch out for Frieren. I will definitely cover it. Again, can't guarantee that I'll do it quickly, but I'll definitely talk about it. The manga is a 10 out of 10 for me, and the anime looks pretty amazing. Like if you're interested in the Frieren anime, I recommend you go to like AniList or my anime list and look at the staff, like what the people in the staff worked before, because like this is a Madhouse production, and Madhouse has had some amazing productions, or maybe not amazing produced anime, but anime that are like classics by themselves. And it had like the studio had a bit of a falling out. It was like as impressive in the, I believe, like last decade, or at least the second half of last decade. But a lot of the people working in Freedom have worked together in shows like Sony Boy, One Punch Man. So I believe also in, God, what's it called? The typewriter anime, Violet Evergarden. So, and there are others, I can't remember them right now, but a lot of these people working on the social feeding anime have worked together before and worked in shows like both by Madhouse and Mappa that have like really high productions. They also worked in, I haven't finished that show, but I watched a couple episodes of Tech Top Destiny, and it was particularly interesting, but it was pretty well produced. Some people also working on that one. So I have complete faith that the Frieren anime is immediately going to be the best anime of the year. But like they're adapting a manga that I think is a 10 out of 10, and it looks as if it's going to be the like most well produced thing of the year. So I'm obviously going to love it. So I'm very excited to talk about that one. But that's not what I'm talking about now, because now I have to talk about Kaiju number 8. I don't have this screen cap of it pulled here for no particular reason. I don't really like relate to it. I'm not in my 30s. I just think it was, well, it would be funny to start there. I should probably keep tabs on like what the next screen cap is going to be, because since I'm talking about like the whole story, basically giving you a review of it, I can't have that many screen caps. I have like less than 30 screen caps for pretty much the whole thing, so I should probably pay attention to that. But, well, Kaiju number 8. What do I think of it? If you've watched the last episodes, the first 2 episodes, which you should, I think it has a fine start. Like, one of the things that I kept pointing out was that it was weirdly fast paced in a way that, well, it felt as if it just wanted to get to the point. That's not how I described it, but that's how I. Well, I should probably rephrase that, because I don't think that there is anything in particular that it was building towards that it really wanted to get out of the way. I just think that the early sections of it are kind of basic, and there is an issue where this is probably just like my mind working out of general expectations, but it feels as if it's going to be a different story than it actually turns out to be. And this can be both a good or a bad thing. It's not really like fair to judge the story on the basis of what it isn't, but I do think it signals some of that. I'm going to explain what I mean by this. I know this sounds very vague, but I'm going to explain what I mean by this probably later. But essentially, this isn't a kaiju story. This is a battle shonen that has kaiju as a gimmick, and I think it's very important to understand that. And the very early moments of it, with Kafka and Reno, I don't remember if it's called Reno or Leno, because different like scans are saying his name starts with an R or an L, so I'm not sure. I'm just going to go between each of them. Can you listen to the cat meowing? Hope you can. Oh, you're not going to complain about a cat meowing. Do you have anything against cats? Anyway, I'm going to explain what I mean by that later on. But I don't think Kaiju number 8 gets better. I don't think it gets amazing. And I probably have a lot to talk about it when it comes to like the later arc and how I think it relates to, well, just comparing it to some other manga, stuff like Chainsaw Man and Kimetsu no Yaiba and Jujutsu Kaisen. I'm going to get to a lot of that. But where we left off in the actual story of Kaiju number 8, we just got basically like the tuning X and arc starts, which was one of the reasons that I said it felt like it was a bit too fast paced. We were already getting to that sort of like competition Well, it's not really a competition, but it's kind of a competition. Like the characters keep having like rivalries with each other, and that it's that classic shonen thing where rivalries make you stronger. So it's not really a competition; it's an accent, but it kind of works like that. It would be weird, like if you look back at Naruto and you have the tuning accent be like the first thing, or I don't know, like even My Hero Academia and having the arc that happens in the second season in the tournament like start very first, very early on. Again, that's just a matter of general expectations, but I do think it jumps the ball a little bit because especially when it comes to the character of Reno, because he's introduced and not much is done with him, and I think he's like overall his existence is a negative to the manga, or at the very least he's completely like inconsequential. I think he's a. This is probably going to sound harsh, but I think he's a bit of a nothing character. I don't really understand him. I don't think his character is going anywhere in particular, and I don't think he's that impactful. I'm talking about Reno. I'm not talking about Kafka. I will talk about Kafka, but for now, like basically what happens here is Kafka is weak. Kafka is weak. They have these power suits. I say they don't look like power suits, but they are. They don't look like power suits because like the strength of them is not just technology. It comes from kaiju cells, and that's what allows it to be really strong without having to be particularly bulky. It's actually kind of a cool concept, like wearing the monster essentially. And well, that also makes it so different people will be able to use it to what's the word I'm looking for? To different capacities. They have a literal like 0 to 100% power that you are able to draw all of it. And Kafka can draw out like 0% of it. He's completely incompatible with it. He does eventually get like to 1% and I think a little bit more, but the point is that Kafka is weak. But Kafka, he's knowledgeable about kaiju, and he manages to prove that he's going to be useful, even if he's trying to keep his Kaiju number 8 persona that wasn't even something he necessarily wanted. He's trying to keep that hidden. It's a bit weird, actually, that the way this is done is like they capture a lot of kaijus and then they have the people that are trying to get into the defense corps. Those people are going to like run a not a battle simulation exactly because the kaiju are real, but that's basically what's going to happen. And it's really weird because again, like kaijus, this isn't a competition exactly. It's really weird that they would do this very irresponsible thing to try and like see who's up to par. I'm guessing you can just explain it as like, well, we don't really have the logistics and the time to properly train everyone in a safe place and have everyone go around with really powerful people around them so that they don't get hurt. We really have to put people through the grinder and see who comes out the other way. Like that makes sense. I don't remember if that's explained that way. Like that makes sense. That's fine. I just find it a bit weird because in most manga, most shonen manga, you generally have something like this, but like those aren't organizations that are fighting against something in particular. Like the tuning exam, it's not as if the ninjas have one main enemy that they are fighting against. So it's weird. It's just like a bit irresponsible, I'd say, to do this. It's not a huge issue, but I don't think it's one of the things that threw me for a loop early on that like make the story kind of not click exactly. I mean, just imagine we have this guy just going around killing everyone. So what if we make people? What if you capture some of them and then we make people that are not ready fight them? So we figure out who can fight it. It's just like it's weird when it's in such a modern setting, especially with again kaiju. But what happens here is that Kafka is weak, but he proves to be useful because he's knowledgeable. He has been cutting kaiju apart for a long time, so he knows a lot about their anatomy. There's like kaijus that are referenced as having appeared for the first, like specific types of kaiju that have appeared for the first time in this year, and this is how it was dealt with. Kafka knows all of that. Like he has studied this shit, and the people that are there doing the fights, and they don't necessarily know all of that. So Kafka proves to be useful, even if he's not the one killing the kaiju. Of course, things go awry in this tuning exam, kind of like they do in the tuning exam, if I remember it correctly. I'm not saying it's copying it, it's just you know what I'm talking about when I mention the tuning exam. What happens is, well, we got introduced to this character called Kikoru Shinomiya. I'm going to call her either name. Kikoru Shinomiya is the best part of this manga. She makes this story. She's easily the highlight. I really like her character. I'm going to get more into it later on. But we got introduced to this bratty girl, tsundere, that she's rich and she's had access to all of this technology before these people, so that's one of the reasons why she's so good at drawing out the power of this costume, because, well, she's rich. That does get recontextualized in a clever, emotional way. It's not groundbreaking, but I do think it's cool. And what happens is that a certain kaiju appears that was not supposed to be there, and it makes another kaiju stronger. It's clearly trying to control. It clearly has some sort of control over the kaijus, and Kikoro is an important person in this group because she's the best prodigy they have, and so they want to retrain someone like her. And this kaiju appears here almost as if it wants to kill her because it knows that she's going to be dangerous in the future. You know, maybe there's something going around in kaiju structure and there's someone pulling the strings. You get it. Do I have a screen cap open? Oh, I do. I have this first. I think this manga has a lot of cool covers. This is one of them. Again, this Kikoru. I don't have a lot of them saved, but I do have a few. It has cool covers. Look for them on Google. I think they're pretty cool. Not all of them, but some of them. This is the kaiju that appears. This kaiju is going to be known as Kaiju number 9. The thing about Kaiju number 9 is that it's smart. It can take the form of a person. Not in the way, well, we don't know that, but there's a lot about this kaiju that we still don't know. He's the main antagonist, and apparently he's going to be the main antagonist for the whole thing. He can turn into a person. I don't think if he took over someone's body, I think he can just turn into someone. Have a... Oh no, he does take people's body over. Yeah, he does take people's body. And he has been doing stuff in human society. He clearly can control the kaiju to some extent. And he appears here because he wants to kill some people that would be important for the fight against kaijus in the future, and to have those people be eaten by kaijus because that will make them stronger. The thing that happens is that Shinomiya is going to be killed here. They have a technology, I don't remember what it's called, but they have a technology that's basically a radar that shows if there is a kaiju around, and it can roughly estimate its strength. I think it's resilience, and then it's resilience 6 point something, 9 point something, whatever. I think it goes from 0 to 10. I don't remember the exact resilience this guy is giving this early on. I think it's 6 point something. So whatever number it is, it's a lot stronger than any kaiju that they captured and put there for this exam was supposed to be there. So clearly this thing's smart, and it's going to kill Shinomiya. I don't have any of its screen cap, but it's way stronger than she is. Well, one of the things that happens here is that Shinomiya, she reminds me of Ryusui from Dr. Stone, which is a character that has a trait that would well conventionally be seen as negative, but that is actually a positive for the people around him. In Doctor Stone, the thing about Ryusui is that he is greedy. He wants to get shit done, and he wants to get it done in like a bombastic way, and in a way that people don't expect, and faster than people expect. But what that does is that manages to draw out like the people's efforts. It brings people together. So it turns out to be a positive. With Shinomiya, she is like this very early on. She seems like a very bratty person that has been raised by a dad that isn't really a good person. That like it's that classic anime dad that puts pressure on their kid, and their kid has to be up to par. She like keeps trying to impress her dad in like some flashbacks that we get in this chapter. And her dad is just like, well, that's just what I expected from you. Aren't you supposed to be a prodigy? I'm not going to praise you for doing that. You're supposed to be that good. You're just doing the bare minimum. You're going to learn a lot about that eventually. And the way that Shinomiya deals with this isn't like, again, like she's bratty. She jokes about this. She jokes about like being stronger than Kafka because like she is. But she does this in a way where she basically arrives at the conclusion that, well, since I am in fact better than other people, and I am a prodigy, I am a genius, I'm going to use that to protect other people because, well, these people are weaker than me, and they're going to probably never be as strong as I am, or if they will be, that's going to take a long time. That means that they are probably going to die, so I'm not going to let them die. I don't remember the exact phrase that she has, but she keeps repeating this phrase that is something along the lines of like, no one dies in my battlefield, or I'm not going to let anyone die in my battlefield. Whether or not that will work in the long run is something else, but I don't think it's like a, well, shonen characters are like, oh, here's why this character is cool. It can be a power, it can be a background, it can be their visual, it can be like a specific scene, and then it kind of moves on, and I think it works. Like these characters aren't particularly complex; they don't really need to be. Like shonen isn't really interested in doing a lot of that, but I think it's cool that very early on, essentially like in the first fight that matters, that is already working against Shinomiya, not because she's wrong, but because like things just aren't that easy. And she ends up having to be saved by Kafka. And Kafka, well, he didn't want to turn because he doesn't want the people around him to know that he is Kaiju number 8. But the way that this is set up, like everyone is evacuating because Kaiju number 9 is strong, and Shinomiya like stays behind to try to keep it in check before other people arrive. And so there is a situation in which Kafka can transform without the defense corps knowing, and only Shinomiya sees it. So he arrives to save her. The dynamic here is obvious, like she was joking about how weak he is, and he turns out to be stronger, whatever. This is probably going to look really good in the end. Like, this is the first big ass punch that I wanted. There is like a whole section before this of his body changing a little bit to adapt to this punch. There's, as you can see, like there's this like smaller like support feet coming out of his leg so that he can, well, sustain himself better. There's a section of his, like his elbow that opens, and there's basically like I don't think it's a mouth. It looks like something that is going to like put air pressure, like a propulsor or something. And Kafka just like, well, he has to kill this thing fast, and he doesn't really know how much power this Kaiju number 8 body has, so he just uses everything he can, and it fucking like obliterates. Again, this is going to look very good in the end if it's well produced, which I think it is. Like, production IG is generally a safe studio, I believe. And well, the trailer that we got, we haven't seen a lot of it, but what we have seen of it looks pretty good. So Yeah, this is going to be in episode 2 of the anime. It doesn't really make sense for it to be in episode 3, at least I don't think so, or unless it's very early in episode 3. And the people are going to share this scene. I'm just imagining like a big ass One Punch Man Sakuga moment. And well, since this is a shonen, that's the sort of stuff that's actually really enjoyable. So this screen cap is already going a lot further. So I don't have a lot of, again, I can't screen cap the whole thing. I'm not going to just tell you everything that happens in the story. But this is the moment where I think it starts getting better. But let's dial back a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself here. What happens structurally after this tuning exam is that the way this is set up, like they find the defense corps think it's weird. Like, well, something killed this kaiju. In the earlier, well, the previous episode, when I said that it was going to be weird if the defense corps didn't manage to find out that kaiju number 8 killed that other kaiju. I don't think that's forced. And the explanation that they give about it's more like an excuse, like, oh, we found these two kaiju and this thing disappeared. Oh, like, why won't the kid and the mother that he saved tell the defense corps? No, like, this thing called Kaiju number 8 appeared and saved us. How would they not get that information? Unless, like, I'm missing something and they got that information, they just didn't believe it. I don't think that's the case, but anyway, that's just weird. The way this is set up is that, well, I'm trying to remember the exact order of the arcs, but it doesn't take long for people to figure out that Kafka is Kaiju number 8. They know that something's Auri because of how smashed this thing's body is when the defense corps get there. And when they get there, like, before that happens, Kafka leaves to get Shinomiya because Shinomiya had stayed behind to try and save everyone, and he manages to get her back. And when the defense corps arrive, the kaiju is already dead, so they don't make the connection. They're like, well, I believe that Hoshina, which is one of the captains, he does say something like, well, it couldn't have been Kafka, he only has a 1%, like, or a 0% at this point. He just managed to save her, but this can't really have been Kikoro, so someone else or something else killed this kaiju. They know that something's weird. Later on, we find out that Hoshina has been, like, suspecting Kafka because of some of his actions. There is a whole other event in which they're, like, fighting against a horde of kaijus, and kaiju number 9 appears again, and Kafka has to fight him, and that ends up with, like, Hoshina fighting against Kafka as kaiju number 8, nearly killing him, in fact, without realizing that it's Kafka. But he does make the connection that, like, the way that this thing is fighting, it shows that it's human. Like, it's fighting not as a kaiju. It's not trying to wreak havoc. It's like dodging. It's fighting like a human, basically. Eventually, what happens is there's another attack that, again, it's very clearly a concentrated attack aimed at one of their base basically. And in that event is when Kafka has to turn, like, in front of people because, well, he's not going to let them die. Fuck this, keeping my identity a secret. I'm not going to let these people go just to keep my identity a secret. And they figure out that it's not super early on. I think it's like 20-something, 30-something chapters. I think it's 20-something. Yeah, if I remember correctly. I should have saved this. As I read the manga, I wasn't saving anything. I read up until chapter 93, which is as far as it has released as of the recording of this thing that we're listening to right now. And then, like, I skimmed through the manga again, just saving some things I should have saved it as I went. That would have been a lot easier and would give me more to save because I would have more screen caps. Anyway, like it's not super early on, but I do appreciate that Kafka being found out isn't like an end game thing. Something else that I appreciate is that like it's actually dealt with, and this is when we get this character introduced. If I remember correctly, his name is Isao. This is Kikoru's dad, actually. He's kind of a big deal. If I remember correctly, he is known as like the strongest in the history of the defense corps, but now he's old. He like commands the defense corps, but he doesn't really fight anymore. The way this is set up is that, well, if we have someone that can turn into a kaiju, this is actually dangerous, and we go through like the logistics of dealing with it. This guy of course takes an issue with that. They want to see whether or not they can turn him into a weapon. If he can control himself, wouldn't it be easier for us to simply like kill him and then turn him into a weapon, as we do with other kaijus? For example, these two gauntlets that this guy is using. I don't remember which. I think this is made from the corpse of the cells of Kaiju number 2. It's a bit weird, if I'm going to be honest, because they don't look like they have like any kaiju. Apparently, it's literally just the kaiju cell, not like a specific part or a specific organ of them that is used. They don't. There is no like body horror to it. It's just a weapon that has kaiju cells, and through some sci-fi shenanigans that like makes it do stuff basically. And well, when these, not that every kaiju has a number, but the particularly dangerous kaiju throughout history, especially like recent history, have had numbers. And out of all of these, Kafka is the kaiju number 8, the monster 8. And these kaijus that were defeated, like special weapons with special properties were made out of them. And it's not easy to find someone that is compatible. And again, even if they do kill Kafka and make a weapon out of him, they might not find someone that is compatible with it. So there is a lot that actually goes in discussing like how to deal with this. The thing that Isao wants to confirm is whether or not he's human or not, because it doesn't seem as if he thinks he is. And he's almost proven right in this fight. This is literally just like a fist fight of him and Kafka. It's how much of a badass this guy is. He's just like fist fight kaiju with this weapon. He's the old shonen guy. Like every shonen has the old guy. Like, don't get me wrong, he's no Netero Isaac when it comes to how iconic he is, but he is a really cool character. I think he serves the story well. I just have this saved because I think it's interesting, because like what happens here is Kafka, in this moment of all moments, actually starts losing control of his transformation. Whoa, so that's why he's called Kafka. He's going through a metamorphosis. Yeah, like I haven't read Metamorphosis, but yeah, that's what's happening. Which I actually don't think it's definitely not the central theme of the story. Maybe accidentally not. And I don't think it's dealt with like in an amazing way. It's okay, or maybe on the weak side, because it doesn't come up that often. But as he loses control over his body like keeps doing weird shit like how it always did. This is a scene like straight out of Tokyo Ghoul. He like breaks his own spine to punch Isao where he wouldn't be able to. And what is happening here? Like, well, this comes later. I just think it's a cool visual representation of Kafka's like potential loss of humanity. Kafka does manage to, in that fight, prove that he can sort of control this. he like stops himself right. He was going to kill himself, and he stops right before that, and like basically attacks himself and in his chest, and I believe holds his core and says like something along the lines of like, "I'm a human. I'm not Kaiju number 8. My name is Kafka Hibbon." Whatever. The dialogue doesn't really matter. Don't remember it exactly, but it does get in a situation where okay, let's try to turn this guy into a weapon. He has shown how powerful he is, and maybe he can control himself. It's actually like interesting for Isau's character that he's not that one dimensional. It's not that just like he hates change and he doesn't want anything that goes along against the rules or that doesn't have any precedent to happen. It seems that it's like indicated that no, he really cares about, well, that is like very clear. He actually cares about the country and he wants to protect people, but it's indicated in this specific instance that he was like giving Kafka a chance, that he could probably have killed Kafka way easier at the start of the fight, but he wanted to see like maybe this guy turns out to be an important asset for humanity. It's interesting when you compare it to Attack on Titan because I'm sure that Kafka is going to end up being extremely important for like the end game. Well, there are indications of that in the most recent arc in specific, but not the whole story is about him. In fact, I'd say that some of the other characters, again, specifically Shinomiya, but at some times also Hoshina, and oh, there are other moments with other characters, even Isao. I think they like eclipse Kafka a lot. I don't think Kafka is like the highlight. I forgot the point that I was going to make. Oh yeah, Attack on Titan. Well, it's interesting when you compare it with Attack on Titan, where of course like things change as Attack on Titan goes on, but the point that is made early on that there is like okay, so we don't know absolutely anything about Titans, and there's a guy that can turn into a Titan, and that completely changes the game. Like that completely changes the war. Not talking about quality. I'm just talking about like what happens in the actual like specificity of what happens, the actual technicality of it. Here it's not like that. Like yeah, Kafka is important. He's strong. We want to draw out his strength to fight against the kaijus, and he's not unwilling. But a lot of the characters are like, I'd say, even more badasses in their own rights. Like the point here is kinda that Kafka is only able to do this because he happens to come upon this power where now he can actually chase his dreams and protect people. And the other characters like are much more badasses than him because they are able to achieve that and have been killing creatures this strong for years without having that's like cheat ability basically. The reason, well, I'm trying to think if there is a specific reason for it, but like Kafka's loss of humanity, it's one of those things where like it comes up and then it isn't mentioned for 20 chapters, and then it comes up again, and then it isn't mentioned for the next arc, like, and then it's important in another fight. Like it's not as if it's never mentioned. It's obviously intentional. The author is keeping it in mind, but I don't think it's executed in a way where it's like groundbreaking and really challenges the character. Like in the end, it all works out. Not that like the point that it all works out, but I don't remember if there was a case where like he lost so much control that like things actually went bad, because like the kaiju controlling his body does go against his character exactly. It's not him coming to like trying to come to terms with some aspect of himself. It's not. I'm going to make a lot of comparisons, and this is probably good just like give you frames of reference and explain why I might or might not care that much about something. But in the Wheel of Time, which I'm not that big of a fan of, but there is a character called Perrin Yaiba. And the thing about Perrin is like he's really big. Perrin is like he's young, he's like I think 18 or something, but he's like enormous. He's really big, he's really powerful, he's really strong, and like he fears how strong he is because he can hurt people without wanting to. This happens in different ways in the series and in the TV series and in the book series, but it's like a big part of his character. Like he's a blacksmith, but he also ends up having to be a warrior, and there's like a big like thematic point made out of whether he's going to choose the hammer, which like creates things, or whether or not he's going to succumb to it and have to choose the axe, which is a weapon of war. Like, not going to spend too much time on this point. I'm just like explaining like that. When it comes to Kafka in Kaiju number 8, it's like, well, he's in this situation, but it's kind of just the situation. It's not like, I think that even Attack on Titan does this, where it's like, oh, I've become the thing that I hate the most, or oh, in order to kill a monster, you have to become a monster yourself. Like, I don't think it goes very deep. It's kind of there. It's fine. And sometimes it comes up, sometimes it doesn't. It does kill the story, but this is one of those things that I think like kind of gives you the wrong impression, because you start a kaiju story it's about like the people on the streets, the guys cleaning the kaiju shit, and the protagonist is called Kafka, which is a obvious reference to Metamorphosis, and then he turns into a kaiju. Like that all signals as if this story is going to be about that, not about like the people on the top, but it's going to be about this guy dealing with his loss of humanity. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that a story can't like turn into other things. Of course it can, that happens all the time. I'm just saying that I think it kind of indicates things not greatly, basically, early on. I'm not sure how the story would have turned out if it had leaned in that a lot, but the way that it eventually goes and gives other characters like their moments to shine, I think it actually turns out to be pretty cool. Like again, bit of a weirdly fast-paced start. I don't think it's particularly dense, but I do think it gets better. Like I think no. Let's leave that for later. Again, Shinomiya. She looks cool. There are cool covers. I'm looking through the next screen caps to see when I should talk about her actual character. Well, early on. I mean, soon. I just have this saved because I didn't really pay attention to these a lot, but from what I've gathered, like whenever there's like a small hiatus, instead of like having a chapter, I'm not sure if these are done by the mangaka. I think it is, but maybe they're done by someone else. I don't know. But like every now and then there would be like just a few like colored pages, and at the bottom of it would be like the message, oh, the main story is going to resume on this date. So whenever there isn't a chapter, it seems as if the author just like draws the characters in certain like events that we don't really see, just to have something to show the audience, which I thought was actually really cool. Like this one in particular, like I like the visual. This could be like a wallpaper. Like I like the the kaiju number 8 eating a popsicle with a backpack. Like I just talked to a school that like the mangaka apparently goes through the hassle of doing that when they're not going to be able to pull out a chapter that week or bi-weekly. I'm not sure how this is published. I just enjoy this. Not sure if this is common. It might be. I just wanted to mention it. I'm having to pause the recording very often to drink water. It still gets me a bit nervous when I'm speaking in English. I'm guessing it's just because I'm not used to, but like I speak for a much longer period of time without, well, in Brazilian Portuguese, which is my native language, without getting like my mouth dry. Or when it does happen, I drink a little bit of water and it passes. When I'm speaking in English, it does really happen. Like I'm almost through a whole bottle, and it does feel as if my mouth is getting any wetter. Anyway, Shinomiya Kikoro. Let's talk about Shinomiya and why I think that she's so good. As I mentioned before, Shinomiya was shown to have like a bad childhood. Her father is a very strict person that just like pulls out all their expectations on this young person without really caring, not without really like lending necessary care to them. And that's like, hopefully in this case, or rather, thankfully in this case, made like Shinomiya develop a certain set of values that she wants to use to save other people. But well, in a lot of stories, this character will turn out to be like reproducing the attitudes that, well, were aimed at them. It does happen here. What we see a lot is that Shinomiya's mother was also incredibly important in the fight against kaijus. They didn't used to be like that all the time, like having a complicated relationship. They were both important. Isao, we already know how powerful he is, how important he used to be. And the mother was called Hikari. It's Hikari. I think it's Hikari, which means light. I mean, like she's the light of hope. Well, whatever. I'm not really joking. I just wanted to mention it. But like Shinomiya was like a daddy's girl. How they I think they described it that way. What happens is they were both strong. They both had like special weapons, monster weapons, but there was one specific kaiju that, well, only her mother managed to kill, but it killed her. And after that, that's when their relationship derailed, like between Shinomiya and her father, because he really like, well, he was traumatized. He lost sight of what he was doing. He just decided that he was going to do everything he can to like kill the kaiju and to keep people safe. And in so doing, he like, well, he killed his inner child. He lost his tenderness to his own daughter, and Shinomiya, like being a child and not really having like a figure of authority around her anymore, because the one that, well, she loved both of them, she still does, but one of them died and the other is just like closed off in his own walls of trauma. Still, through all of that, she managed to come out the other way, like being inspirational to others. And I really like that. I think she's a really interesting character. She's not like particularly complex. Again, this is a shonen. It's not, but she's the one that like impacted me emotionally the most. I didn't like cry. I never really cry with fiction. Unfortunately, I'm not saying that like to brag. It's not a good thing. But I do. I just think she's the highlight. I think she's the best character. I think she's the coolest. I think she has like the most well realized emotional arc. When Kafka was losing his shit, like losing his humanity, almost killing Isao, there's a moment where no, he's almost going to kill Isao, and Shinomiya thinks to herself like, "Oh, well, I already lost my mother. How bad will it be if I see my father die in front of me?" Specifically, like being killed by Kafka. Like, if you do this, I'm going to kill you myself. And then she like the switch flips in her head, and she goes like, "No, I'm going to trust Kafka." And she shouts out to him that he is not going to lose to a monster, and that's what like he hears this, he thinks about Mina, and that's what like causes him to take control over the body again, the Kaiju's body again, and stops himself from killing Isao. Again, I just think it's cool that like in a moment like that, Shinomiya found it in herself to like not snap, basically. Like she's a kid that she's like literally 16 years old during the story. She's a kid that has way too much on her mind. She's like basically forced to deal with a lot more responsibility than anyone should, no matter their age, but specifically a teenager that had like a very rough life in the since her mother died. But again, through all of that, she still managed to come out the other side bright. And all of that is foreshadowing, because in keeping up with the old strong dude in a shonen trope, Isao dies. So like Kaiju number 9 eventually managed to get to him and takes over his body. This is a big deal because like Kaiju number 9 can take the memories. It's not clear if it's all of the memories, but apparently so. It might not be, but at least like most of the memories. Kaiju number 9, if it takes over someone's body, has access to their memories, and so it's actually a big loss for the Defense Corps to lose specifically Isao to him, because not only do we lose someone that was compatible with a numbers weapon, we lose someone that was important for the morale because of his history in the Defense Corps, and it's also specifically the guy who was in charge of the Defense Corps, and so he knows everything about everyone's like strengths and weaknesses and base and about training and like specific what's the word I'm looking for protocols and missions, and so like losing him is like is really bad. Like Kaiju number 9 actually managed to score this is like halfway through where the manga is right now. He managed to score a really big win for his side by doing this. And of course, like the way that this affects Shinomiya is it's not easy on her. There's like scenes of her crying and all of that and having to come up with her resolve. It's very like Shonen 101, bad thing happens. Again, not really a critic, it's just like structurally effective but also simple. Something bad happens, character has to train, they like why am I forgetting words so often? They train until they get better. I forgot the word. Perseverance. Perseverance is the word that I was thinking about. I'm sorry. I don't know how to speak English. And after this, there's like a big section of, if I remember correctly, there's a big section of like training and stuff. Throughout this manga, there were like characters going to different like units, and so we get to meet different commanders that all use different weapons and fight in slightly different ways. Some of them are cool, some of them aren't that cool. Mina actually ends up not being that important to the story, and like she's extremely powerful with her weapons, but she does end up like for the narrative, Mina isn't as important as it seems like she will be at the start. Something else that is really fucking weird. Remember the tiger that I mentioned that might or might not be a real tiger? It is a real tiger. And like Mina has this really like heavy rifle, and when she's going to shoot, like the tiger leans against her back. I don't remember if this was in the last episode. I think it was. Anyway, like to give her support while she's firing. But it never comes up again. Like I don't think that like the tiger has appeared again like a cover, but I don't think it has actually appeared in the story again. Especially because like the weapons that she's using now is like a whole fucking like structure. Like the tiger is so weird. It feels as if like it was just like a gimmick that the author was developing, but it doesn't really achieve anything. I have this reaction because I had completely forgotten about the tiger, and when I mentioned Mina, I remember the tiger. So yeah, Mina doesn't actually end up being that important. After this is where like we get the build up for the. I don't think it's going to be the last arc, but it's like the big arc. The arc that is happening right now is like the big shonen arc. And what happens in it is that Kaiju number 9, through everything that it has like found out about about the defense corps in his fights, and also by having absorbed Isau's body, he managed to, because he can actually create kaijus through some way that we don't understand. I'm actually kind of curious about this because like we don't know if Kaiju number 9 is like the first, if he's like actually their ruler, if through some sort of like evolution he managed to get there, if there are others like him, if this is happening to any capacity in other places around the world. Because it's not as if he's like that much powerful than all of the kaijus. So I'm actually curious about this, but what happens is like Kaiju number 9 creates kaijus that are going to be able to, that are like specifically designed to fight against certain people in the defense corps. Like everyone's going to fight their doppelganger basically. Like it's the big shonen arc. I think it's a lot of fun. I don't think it's better than like the first like section of it until basically like when the story starts dealing with Kafka, like Kafka reveals who he is and that he is Kaiju number 8. I think it gets better from there. I'm not saying it's like the most amazing thing, and I do think this story has an issue where this is going to sound very weird, but it's a bit too consistent. Yes, that's a criticism apparently. Like again, I'm going to talk about this in comparisons, but it does do anything that wows me. That is like, oh, this is really impressive. But it's like good enough in most of the things it tries to do. It's a very solid, very fun story, and I thought I had a rating for it, but now that I'm talking about it, I'm not sure. We'll figure it out. I just have this scene like this seems like kind of funny to me. I keep mentioning Attack on Titan, but there is like a scene in Attack on Titan where something very similar happens. I'm not even a fan of Attack on Titan, by the way, but I do think there are a lot of clear similarities. There's a scene in the first season where, like, I think Eren throws the female Titan. I'm not going to say the name just in case someone isn't caught up with it. And like we have the scene inside a church of the people praying, and like the Titan falls on top of the church, and I don't remember if it kills everyone, but it surely kills some people and like destroys the place. And something similar happens here, where like, oh, there's going to be a marriage, and then there's a big kaiju. I think it looks very cool, by the way. I do like how this looks. It's just like, fuck Jesus. I don't know. I'm not saying that's what the story is saying. Just like I was not expecting. Like, if you describe this scene to me, I would thought it would look like very terrifying, but something about this looks very goofy to me. I should actually, I think this is a good point for me to talk about the world building of Kaiju number 8. Oh, and here's something that you have to understand. It's not that valid of a criticism in my mind to complain about something that a story isn't interested in doing. I think you can criticize it for like maybe not doing the obvious, maybe alluding to something and not never getting there. But when I just said like not doing the obvious, I'm not saying like I keep saying shame. I'm not saying that a story has to do the obvious. I'm saying that like it could be weird where if like a story mentions something and that has a very obvious implications and the characters just don't discuss it. Like it feels as if the author might simply be trying to not bring attention to an issue or doesn't even realize it. Oh, I don't think that Kaiju number 8, even though again it's more of a shonen and it's not really interested in all of this world building, I don't think it misses opportunities and it messes with your suspension of disbelief a little bit by not mentioning this at least a little. Again, this could change in the future, but if you think about it, this is alternate history because, well, kaijus have been attacking in Japan in this world since like the 1600s, I believe. Something along those lines. Of course, the kaijus were weaker then. It is explained to us that like the average resilience of kaijus has been rising throughout history, and very recently did it have like a big jump with the actions of Kaiju number 9. But it's just weird that apparently, even though we have been killing kaijus since the 1600s, the world is the same. Like, let's say we had like the avatar bending techniques for 1,000 years. The world would not be the exact same that it is today. I'm not saying that if you're going to write a story that deals with any sort of fantastical element, you need to figure out how it affects in a logical way every single facet of society. That's not what I'm talking about. But I don't think that Kaiju number 8 should have paid a little bit more attention to it because it doesn't really make sense that. Of course, the characters can't explain it in a way where, oh, this is how it is in your world. They can't like bring attention to it in that direct of a way. But everything that we know makes it feel as if like technology and society and culture and religion has developed in the exact same way that it did in our world, despite the presence of kaijus for like around 4 centuries, maybe more. Like, there should be at least a little bit of flavor added. Like, for example, like how would, of course, you could make this be the point and write a story focused on it. Again, Kaiju number 8 isn't interested in it. It should be a little bit, I think. I'm repeating myself. But like, how would this affect, in this case, like Christianity? Like, would like Christians see kaiju in a specific way? Would it connect to some specific prophecy from the Bible? Would it be used as an argument like against Christianity? Because like, well, if Jesus, if God made all of these prophecies, why didn't he talk about these? Or is this what he's referencing in one of his prophecies? Again, I'm not saying the story necessarily has to go this way and make these specific points that I'm mentioning. I just think it's weird that like the only thing that seems to have changed is that we have these specific weapons, but at the same time, these weapons were they are constructed specifically like by using kaiju cells and like muscles and stuff. So this is all like very recent development. Like I would like if there was a little bit more to the history, basically, of like how this affected the world. A lot of stories do this. I just think that in the case of Kaiju number 8, where it's something that is so important to the world, it's so important to society, it's not something that is kept hidden. It's not that, people don't know that there are hunters about, but we still know a little bit about how they know about these magical creatures, so their common sense isn't exactly the same as our world. But it's not really a big issue because we keep the name power as a secret as much as we can. Like, it's not that. It's like, well, imagine again if hunters were like known by everyone, and if every week there was like a hunter battle, like what? My brain. If every week there was like hunters battling in your street, but they were just developed the same way, there was like in sort of like, let's say, like police dedicated to dealing with it. It would have been weird, like suspension of disbelief. It's not a tremendous issue, but it is an issue. Even if Kaiju No. 8 isn't that interested in bringing attention to certain issues because it's more of a shonen, it's doing the things that it's interested in. I do think it lacks a little bit in this regard by not recognizing maybe just a little bit. Like, well, Chainsaw Man I think does this, where we see a lot about how it affects, like, well, not a lot, but we see a decent amount of in Chainsaw Man of how it affects like society and media and people's psychology, especially the psychology. We see a lot actually. And in the recent arcs, we're getting a lot about like, the Chainsaw Man in the media. Like there's a meta narrative going there. I'm not saying these stories have to be similar. Again, I'm going to talk more about it when I make more comparisons later on, if I actually do. I just wanted to dedicate a moment to talking about this because this is a review, man. If I don't like something, I'm going to mention it. This is here just because some of you might think it's cool. Again, it's Kaiju No. 9 has been pulling the strings and designed all of these kaijus that I don't remember if I have. Yeah, I do have them screen capped, but later. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about Shinomiya. I'm not even sure what I'm going to talk about. I just think she's really cool. Shinomiya, not only did she early on got like an axe made specifically for her, she actually can now use there's like this whole facility that like launches her in the air so she can get from one point to the other depending on where there is a kaiju attack very fast. And the suit that she's wearing is numbers 4, which was the same suit that her mother used. The kaiju like numbers weapon, they can be like suits, weapons, or kind of the two in a way. Like Reno gets one where it's a suit, and this is the first person in history to be compatible with number 6, I believe is that one. And it can freeze things. Here, this one's about mobility, and I think it looks really cool. She can fly now. She's not just cool. I don't just like think she's a cool character. She just kill shit. She can also fly now because why not? Let's kill kaiju while flying around them. This here, I think it's a good showcase of how fast her mobility is with this numbers 4 suit, to the point that she can like hit this creature head in a way, and before it stops moving, she can hit its neck, come from the other way. But I have this here specifically because it reminds me. It's pretty much like it's the exact same concept, basically, even if it's not explained in that way, as that one move that I don't remember the name of from Jin Mori, the protagonist of The God of High School. He like has this move where he kicks a person like 3 times really fast, almost simultaneously, and it has this effect. I just think it looks cool. There are plenty of moments in this story of just like, here's a cool way to kill a kaiju. I'm not going to show all of them because that would like kind of kill some of the fun for people, I think. But Shinomiya has a lot of them, and she's cool. I love her. Yeah, I should probably have this screen cap earlier. If I do start like structuring these reviews a little bit more, what I should do is, instead of only having things in chronological order, I should have them in the order that I'm going to talk about. For example, I talked about how everyone's going to fight their doppelgangers, but only now am I getting to the doppelgangers and how Kaiju No. 9 has like studied people. Maybe I should have like put this earlier on. So right now I'm just repeating myself. This is, as they say, this is the first time in history that we were the ones studied instead of the kaijus. And this is what I mean with it. It's Shonen 101. Like, there's a kaiju with a sword made out of flesh, and there's a guy sword fighting against the kaiju. That's cool. Like, yeah, as I said, not that dense. There's some things going around, but it's cool. That's all you need sometimes from a shonen. I don't really know how to exactly explain this, but this is Hoshina. There are plenty of scenes of him being a cool-ass swordsman. And these are the kaijus that have been like specifically designed to fight certain people. I just have them here because you might think they look really cool. It's kind of funny that they're like 3 of them look like a kaiju, and then 1 of them looks like a persona, and the other one has boobs. This is very late into the manga, where it is now. Again, everyone's finding their doppelgangers. This is obviously the doppelganger that Kikoru is going to be fighting. There's like a big point made out of. Oh, I do have this screen cap. Actually, it's the next one. Do I have this twice? Why does it say I have this twice? I don't know. Anyway, a big point is made out of, like, this kaiju has been created by kaiju number 9 that is using Isau's body. So essentially, like, not actually, but these are 2 like daughters looking up to their father that are quote unquote the same person, Isao, and someone in Isau's body that has Isau's memories, and they are fighting because of this. This is why they look so similar. And this is where I just remember that I was going to talk about like what I think is the main theme of this story. And I think I kind of explained it, but one moment, because I'm going to take this opportunity to shit on Kimetsu no Yaiba a little bit, because what is happening here right now and on screen, Kimetsu no Yaiba does this every arc, and it's really fucking obnoxious. Like, every single time there is a demon that is going to die on Kimetsu no Yaiba, it has a flashback right at the moment that it's going to die, and then we find out about its sad story, and it's like, oh, you were kind of like humans, and it's the big bad guy that is actually the big bad guy. And it happens in every single arc. It's so fucking annoying. God, like, I'm not a fan of Kimetsu no Yaiba. I think it's pretty meh. I don't even think it's like average. I think it's meh. What saves it is that it has some really cool shit. I don't even like the production that much. I'm not even sure how I'm going to like rate Kimetsu no Yaiba once I'm finished with it. I think it fluctuates a lot. I think when you put the whole story together, it's kind of I'm not a fan of it. And this specific part of it was so annoying to me, reading Kimetsu no Yaiba, because it's like character is going to die. Flashback. Character dies. Every single fucking arc. Why I have this on the screen, aside from taking a dump on Kimetsu no Yaiba, is that this has happened, unless I'm misremembering something, but this has happened a single time in 85 episodes of like build up of the emotional situation of Shinomiya, and then she fights against a doppelganger that like goes through the same thing as her, and she still says to this like no, fuck you, you're a literal murderer. But I still hate number 9. I'm going to kill him. But come on, do you really expect me to like forgive you simply because you have a sad backstory? And of course you can extrapolate this to having a God am I shouting? You can extrapolate this to having a whole discussion about like lending compassion, which is a theme that I really care about, but I think it's done pretty well here. I think this manga is a little bit better than I was planning on saying it was when I started this record. Anyway, what's the big theme of Kaiju number 8? It's intergenerationality. Am I saying this right? Let me Google it. Intergenerationality. So this, like, I'm sure you've heard this being described as a passing on of the torch. Like, a big point is made through several times, and specifically around Shinomiya, of this idea that there were powerful people in the last generation, and they fought against these kaijus. They figured out all the information that we had, and a lot of them died. And then there are like the remainings of that generation that are trying to pass on this knowledge and these resources and these values onto the next generation, because they are the ones that are going to have to carry the torch. That comes up a lot more than Kafka's Loss of Humanity. It comes up with more characters. It specifically comes around like Shinomiya, which I'm not saying she's the protagonist, but like there is more thematic and emotional development around her than there is like around Kafka and Reno. This is also one of the reasons why I think Reno is a weak character, because am I misremembering something? I don't think we ever like really understand or like get an extensive, at least, explanation of why Reno is doing the things that he does. If I should probably Google this, but if I'm remembering correctly, like we never get like a long backstory for Reno. So, like, yeah, Reno is like he's like a good person. He's fighting. He's getting stronger, but the extent of Reno's development in the story is that he gets stronger. It's that the amount of power that he manages to take out of the power suit increases. That's his character. He comes up every now and then, and that's what's happening around. And then he gets another power because now he has another suit. That's all there is to him. Like, there is no strong emotional connection behind that and behind like how it relates to him as a person, as there is with Shinomiya, as there is with Kafka. And not only Reno, like very early on in the Tuning Exit arc, we get introduced to a lot of characters that are like, oh, these are all like impressive people, blah blah blah. None of them matter. There is one of them that like appears every now and then, and that is developing like a dynamic with Reno, because Reno actually like he, like the other characters, he goes to like train somewhere else and learn a specific way of fighting, and that's how they find out that he's compatible with these numbers in particular. And there is a character development dynamic with him where it's like a character that thought he was like the real shit until he joined the Defense Corps and he realized that everyone's more talented than him. And Reno in particular is like keeps getting stronger. We never understand why Reno is getting stronger. He just is. He doesn't have like the background that Shinomiya has, the emotion that Shinomiya has, all of the reasons why she was raised this way and how she got out of that with this set of values, and this is what keeps her going forward, and she has had access to this technology, well, since before most people, and like that's why she's strong. Like, there is an element of, no, she's just talented, but we understand it a lot more. There's a lot more information to it. I don't care about Reno. Reno does nothing for me as a character. He's kind of there. He's going to be important later on, I'm sure. Like, he keeps being hyped up, but he's only hyped up because of the numbers. Like, his character is becoming stronger, and we don't really see a lot of it because it happens in like bouts. We don't follow him that often. Generally, he's like, again, like, there is this theme of the passing on of the torch to the next generation, and it's done with a lot of characters, specifically around Shinomiya, a lot more effectively and a lot more emotionally than it is with the others. And because of that, Reno and all of these other guys that we don't know anything about just kind of blend into the background. This comes up a lot more than Kafka's Loss of Humanity. It's a lot more. Yeah, I care about it a lot more, like personally, and I think it's better executed. I don't think it's amazing. It's not groundbreaking, but it's something that once it starts becoming center stage with like the arc that Isao is introduced, and we find out about Shinomiya's mother dying and how Kafka doesn't want to kill her father, and they're like sort of forming this like bond relationship. There's a lot of indication that like Shinomiya might be slowly falling in love with Kafka specifically because they were saved, but or maybe she's just like flustered. It does get obnoxious, and it isn't has been presented in a problematic way. The point is like it is being developed, and Reno and these other characters that are kind of built up feel as if they're only built up because that's what happens in shonen. It feels as if it's just like a convention of the genre, and doesn't really do much for me. Reno is kinda there. I'm sure he's going to be important, but the other characters have been a lot cooler. We have to understand why they are cooler for a lot longer, and we were like better understand why they are doing this. That's the Reno rant. That's the Kimetsu no Yaiba rant. And I think that's about it, actually. I have been talking about getting to comparisons, but I have been doing comparisons all along. This is where I'm caught up. Not like exactly this scene. There have been nice 3 chapters. I haven't really touched on like Hoshina's character and some of the cool stuff that he does. Again, I don't want to spoil everything. I've spoiled enough already. But I have enjoyed this manga more than I was expecting to after like the first few arcs, because again, weirdly fast paced, felt like a bit conventional in certain aspects. The theme of Kafka's Lost of Humanity takes a long time to get into the story, but it does get better. It went from being average to, well, this is actually kind of fine, to no, like, well, I actually care about this character. I think this is the engoodening of this last like 2 to 3 arcs is the engoodening of Kaiju number 8. I'm not sure how to score this. Well, in me trying to make my mind about it, let's talk about some other shit. Not shit, just other stuff. It's kind of impossible to not compare. Like, I like judging stories on their own rights, but I also think that comparing it with other stories after you make your point helps other people understand what you mean. Because someone might listen to what I'm saying and completely disagree with it. So, one of the points that I also want to make in like this podcast as a whole is like, I want you to understand why I care about certain things, not just what happens in the story. So, in order to try to achieve that, for example, it's impossible to not compare this with Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen. There has been this bigger like revival of the Devil Corps / Defense Corps, as I've mentioned in the past, in Shonen Jump in the last 2 years. Kimetsu no Yaiba was extremely popular, Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, and there are a lot of others that are similar, like that aren't that popular, like Jigokuraku, or I'm not sure if Ayashimon like registers to that one, though Ayashimon isn't that good. It's by the same author of Jigokuraku and it got cancelled. I read a few chapters of it. I didn't really care about it. I thought it was pretty disappointing after Jigokuraku. I've heard of a few other ones as well. And, well, this seems to be like as if Bleach like somehow overlasted everything. I'm not sure how exactly similar Defense Corps stories are to Bleach. I might just be like conflating the urban fantasy aspect of it because I never really watched the Bleach. But the point is that comparing these stories, like Chainsaw Man is way faster paced than Kaiju number 8 ever gets. It's breakneck speed every fucking chapter. But if you know anything about me, you know that I think Chainsaw Man is one of the best mangas ever written. And why is that? Because it really uses its fast pacing to get to as many different points as it possibly can. It does a lot of things as it goes. For example, this is explained a little bit in Kaiju number 8 as well, where don't get too attached because in this line of work, people can die at any moment. And it just doesn't happen in Kaiju number 8. We know that it has happened. We see it happening one specific moment with Isao. And we know that it has happened in the background of Shinomiya, but I don't think that really counts because the circumstances are very different. They weren't all fighting. Shinomiya wasn't fighting with them. It's a bit different. But in Chainsaw Man, for example, we see it happening every single arc, and it really gets to the bottom of how it affects these people's psychology, how they are all fucked up in some way, how they all have to banter in order to deal with that trauma, how they get through emotional hurdles faster and easier than what you would expect because this job has affected their minds so much. A big point is made out of Denji's character in particular, of how he's a stupid kid, but at the same time that he's taking this job, he does have a big sense of responsibility towards it, and he canonically doesn't feel emotion as strong as humans because he's being affected by having this devil heart to some capacity. This all relates to the recurring motive that only the insane last in this job to some capacity. It affects the story, it affects the themes, it affects the characters, it affects their emotional arcs a lot more. It permeates the entire story. We get through that a lot faster. It is also, of course, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with me on this one. It's a lot more iconic. It looks a lot more impressive. It has genius paneling. It's the curse devil that you hit someone 3 times with the curse devil, or something imbued with the power of the curse devil, and maybe it might be ritual and not curse, whatever, and it will basically kill that person, but these devils always take something in return. And there's a moment when Aki is using that devil's power and it takes their memory, his memory of some people, and the way that is drawn is you get the actual panel of Aki and standing beside some people, and that devil's finger comes out of the page and smushes their face, and you can't see them because the finger is on top of their faces. There are plenty of scenes where the specific way that a character is drawn makes them interact with more than one panel at the same time. So it's not as if the fast pacing in particular is an issue. It's generally, I prefer a lot more laid back, not laid back, but slower paced stories that really give themselves the time to develop a certain philosophy, I guess. For example, Vinland Saga and Sousou no Frieren, or Hoseki no Kuni. I'm sure if you've read those and I've mentioned them in this specific topic, I'm sure you can make the connections between all of them. So it's not as if the fast pacing in itself is an issue. That's not what I'm complaining about. But while Kaiju number 8 does get better as it goes, I also think it's a lot more conventional. So if you compare it to like Jujutsu Kaisen, for example, Jujutsu Kaisen is a really hard manga for me to judge because I think it fluctuates a lot. I think it has dog shit moments. Like there are plenty of moments where the powers don't make any sense. The metaphors that the characters use to explain it is nonsensical. The narrative structure it doesn't exist. Like Jujutsu Kaisen Zero was written first, and then Jujutsu Kaisen was written, and instead of like incorporating all of those elements, it's like kind of shoehorned in, and that's why you have like the story going backwards in a weird way. Not that having a flashback in itself is bad, but it goes to a certain point, then it goes back, then you have to watch Zero, and then you don't understand certain elements of how it relates to each other because it's very obvious that Zero was meant to be a standalone. There are things that aren't mentioned in Zero that are mentioned later, and the characters are simply like sort of removed out of the story so that they can come back later. And when you watch Zero, like the presentation, the way the characters arc, it's very obvious that some of the things that happened in Jujutsu Kaisen weren't like being set up there. Of course, they're not being set up. It's just meant to be a one shot. I think it hurts Jujutsu Kaisen that it wasn't like all rewritten into Jujutsu Kaisen instead of they're just like happening in the same universe. That being said, Jujutsu Kaisen has a lot more memorable characters. There is no character in Jujutsu Kaisen that I care emotionally like a lot for, but the characters are a lot more distinct visually when it comes to their powers, when it comes to their personalities, even if they might be superficial. It's a lot more audacious in certain ways, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For example, like I think it does work that well for the narrative structure that I just mentioned in these specific cases, but it does work for the Shibuya arc because the Shibuya arc is easily the best part of Jujutsu Kaisen. And like to explain what I think of these stories, Kaiju number 8 is more of a consistent, very slow ride, and Jujutsu Kaisen is all over the place, but it has both higher heights and lower lows, in my opinion. I don't like not that I don't like, but like the beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen, I think it's kind of weak in that after like the first episode, I believe, I remember it not really like going anywhere emotionally, and until it like really embraces, because Jujutsu Kaisen has like a lot of life lessons that it's starting to pass on to people, and I think it works better when it's just being a shonen, and occasionally you get that. In the specific case of the Shibuya arc, it's it's much more audacious when it comes to narrative structure. And in the specific case of the Shibuya arc, I think it works. After that, I think the story just goes downhill a little bit in this whole arc that we are having, like the Culling Game arc. I think it pulls too much from like Hunter x Hunter because Akutami Gege has made it very clear that their inspiration is Hunter x Hunter, and they want their style to be as close to Hunter x Hunter as possible. They have stated that very clearly. Like Jujutsu Kaisen sometimes will have like highlights, like the lawyer character, like Hakari's power, like Junpei's arc. But in between, like the drama of the main characters, I don't really care about. For example, like, what's her name? Kugisaki Nobara? Nobara is kind of a non-factor in this story. She's kinda there, I'm not going to spoil anyone, like beyond where the anime is. I kind of did, but I'm not going to explain what those words mean. But like, there isn't a lot of dynamics between these three characters. Itadori's the point is kind of that he's like the normal guy, but I don't think a lot is done with that. So he ends up like failing in comparison to all of the other characters way more than Kafka ever does. But at the same time, it's a lot more iconic in its design sensibilities. And when it has a big ass cool moment, it sticks in my head a lot more than moments in Kaiju number 8. Though it also like the production of the anime is well with the exception of the grasshopper fight, that episode that was the production that was that good. But the production of the anime does a lot to sell its style. A big point from Jujutsu Kaisen is how stylish it is, and I do think it sells that very well. I'm sure you all remember like the internet going crazy over the first ending, just because of how cool it looked and because of how we got all of these characters with interesting designs drawn in like different fashions of like modern. I wouldn't say high fashion, but like modern clothing. So I do think that when you compare these two stories, again, this is just for you to better understand my opinion on it. I think they're about as good, but for different reasons. Kaiju number 8 is more consistent. Jujutsu Kaisen is more audacious, but it either takes too long to get to the point sometimes, or it does things that I think are really cool. Like I think I remember the Shibuya arc very well, and like I remember certain visuals of it that were like very interesting and certain powers as well. But when you compare those two things, considering like the overall story, I think they average out. Like my opinion of them is like I enjoy these two stories about the same for different reasons. No, I don't think I need to repeat myself on that. When it comes to Kimetsu no Yaiba, it's not as if I despise Kimetsu no Yaiba. I don't remember what I scored it, but yeah, I'm not a fan of Kimetsu no Yaiba. I think it's very superficial. I don't think the production is as not that it isn't as good, but I don't think the production does as much for it as people make it out to. And it's just kind of structurally the same thing happening over and over again. There is like an unfortunate elements to it because I'm pretty sure that like Kimetsu no Yaiba had to be finished earlier than the author intended because of like personal problems, and that is like as an artist myself, like that's something that I don't want to criticize or make fun of. That I have to finish the Kimetsu no Yaiba manga. I just noticed this similarity between these two events, and well, I just had a rant about it that I wasn't even like planning to sound that way, basically. But yeah, I'm not that big of a fan of Kimetsu no Yaiba. Also, at some point, like the author explains that the powers that the characters use aren't like real. Like whenever there's like fire or water or lightning, that is just visual, and that makes no goddamn sense. And I'm pretty sure it directly contradicts things that happen in the story. So I'm just throwing out that out there in case you enjoy Kimetsu no Yaiba. I didn't want to come off as this character. I'm not. I don't despise it. I just let me poke fun at Kimetsu no Yaiba. Okay, that's pretty much it when it comes to Kaiju number 8. This actually ended up being longer than I expected. I can probably make a. What if I make a podcast just about this? Wouldn't that be cool? Like, here's the review for Kaiju number 8. And then in the normal, like, M Talk Zany episodes, I only talk about the stuff that I'm covering, like, the first one or two chapters of. I might do that. I'll figure it out in the following hours. Or maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure. What do you think of Kaiju number 8? Have you read it? Did anything that I say made you interested in it? What do I score it? I think it's like a very like solid 7. I'm not expecting it to get better, but it definitely can. Like I don't have high hopes for it. I'd say again, I'm thinking about Jujutsu Kaisen because of how I scored it. Yeah, I think this is like a very solid 7, and depending on how it goes, it might become like a 7.5 or a strong 7 to a light 8, as they say. But I don't see this becoming like more than an 8 out of 10. And it's already better than I was expecting. Like the after the first few chapters, I was thinking like, yeah, this is like a 6 out of 10 manga, and occasionally it has like a cool shonen moment that doesn't really mean anything. But as I kept reading it, I did find other things to care about emotionally and, well, structurally a little bit, despite the fact that it's very conventional shonen. Not extremely conventional, but it it becomes less conventional a little bit as it goes on. It does really do like an extremely good job of making everyone shine because like some of the characters just blended together and they're kind of the same or sort of abandoned. But yeah, as it stands now, as of chapter 93, I score Kaiju number 8. Not an 8, but a very solid 7.0 out of 10. Now, if this turns out to be an episode by itself, how do I say goodbye?